What About Vietnam? A podcast with Gary Newsom. The series where Gary talks with travellers about their experiences and adventures. Find out more about Vietnam from the people who have actually been there.
What about Vietnam?
Whether it's adventure, exploring the culture and cuisine, shopping, or just soaking up the sun. Let Carrie and her travellers pave the way for a magical holiday in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?
Xin chào and welcome to What About Vietnam. Our subject today is craft beer, and it's an amazing topic to bring up as in regard to Vietnam, but to not include it in the show and to not have it up there as something really worth talking about would be crazy, because there's a real craft beer scene happening in Vietnam as we speak. And that's been developing in a really strong way just over the last maybe 3-4 years in particular. And I'm delighted today to have Gary Bett on the show. Gary is the head brewer and founder of the Five Elements Brewing Company, which is a small independent brewery in Da Nang. Gary's been in the brewing industry for over 40 years and worked in the UK, Australia, Fiji, China, India, and Vietnam. He actually started as a hop chemist. I don't know what a hop chemist does. I wish I'd asked him actually in the show. I should have done that. And he started that role with the Brewing Research Foundation in the UK before becoming an actual brewer with CUB in Melbourne, Australia. After finding himself responsible for Foster's breweries in Asia, India, China, and Vietnam, he always loved coming to Vietnam, which is where he eventually decided to set up his business after leaving Foster's. Vietnam is a great beer market, and as it turns out, this is quite an interesting statistic to take on board, is the fact that of all alcohol consumed in Vietnam, 95% of it is beer, which is quite extraordinary when you do compare it to other countries around the world. Now, the one important thing about craft beers and Vietnamese craft beers is that you've got to come to Vietnam to try them. And I'm delighted that Gary is on the show because he has tap rooms, the Brew Ha Ha tap rooms in Da Nang. He also has them in Quang Ngai and Nha Trang, and he opens more in the coming years. He brews a very interesting 5-element brews, and he talks about some of the local ingredients that he has access to in the Northern Highlands and in the Central Highlands, where he uses various different natural ingredients to flavour the beers. And it's those natural ingredients and those flavours which is the craft, obviously, and he tells us a little bit about that. But it means that when you go to try them in the future, when you do come to Vietnam, and let's face it, you've got to, it's just an experience to have, that you're going to start thinking about some of these flavours that Gary has mentioned. Look, all the details will be in the show notes and available in the transcript on our website, whataboutvietnam.com, if you prefer to go there and read about it. It's all going to be there. In addition, I've kind of added on the website a really fun activity and fun offer. So check it out. It is the Barbecue Beach Food Tour. And let me tell you what it involves. It takes you through the food markets of Da Nang, and it's done with an operator who actually is a qualified chef. And he will then, after you've had, bite-sized pieces and little taste tests along the way, you'll actually get whipped off to this secret location in Da Nang, which is beachside, and then he will cook up using some of the bits and bobs that he's bought at the markets on the day. You'll get greeted there with beers, local beers, craft beers, and some wine, and over a setting with a bonfire, candles and music. The whole tour kind of wraps up with you, sipping some nice long cool drinks over a sunset. I had a hand in crafting this with the operator in Da Nang, and I just feel 100% sure you're going to love it. So please check it out. However, it's time to get ourselves acquainted with craft beers in Vietnam, and I can't think of anybody else to do it better than Gary Bett, who's sitting in Da Nang. So let's welcome Gary to the program. Xin chào and welcome to the What About Vietnam podcast. Today I'm speaking with Gary Bett. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Look, today we're going to be talking about a favourite beverage amongst Vietnamese. Well, I mean, I don't think it's exclusive to Vietnamese, how much they love beer. I mean, I'm an Aussie, so clearly I come from a country that loves beer. But in particular today, I'm talking to you about craft beer, because craft beer, in my experience over the last few years in Vietnam, has really been coming up in the headlights. You know, you've got to try the craft beers. Go to Da Nang, you've got to go and try craft beer. So, Gary, I see you as the entrepreneur in this area, and you've certainly been doing a lot of work over the last few years in the craft beer industry in Vietnam, having come from a beer and a brewing history. Tell us a little bit about what makes a craft beer.
How does a craft beer distinguish itself from a commercial beer? Well, I think it's in the word craft, and that's all about natural ingredients, about the Vietnamese say beer tu cong, which means handmade. Tu congs, it's made with the hands, which I think sums it up. So we're talking about small breweries, small independent breweries making a natural product, making beer. And in Vietnam, of course, there's some special ingredients that you can draw on, and also there's a vibrant Vietnamese cuisine, which of course influences taste and preferences. And so there's been quite a variety of craft beers that have been developed in Vietnam.
So when we think about a craft beer, we're thinking about a beer that is handcrafted.
Yeah.
And you did say that this beer includes some natural ingredients.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those flavours and some of those natural ingredients that define it, I guess?
Sure. I mean, beer, by definition, is malted barley or malted grain, hops and yeast. And with craft brewing, we've introduced other local ingredients. Now I'm brewing a range of beers. I brew five beers as the Five Elements range, the Nu Hang range. And so we basically have an international style beer, perhaps a well-known beer, and then we're adding a Vietnamese flavor that's complementary to that. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. We brew a beer toe, which is a Black Forest ale. Now that evokes, all those sort of gives you a picture straight away of what you're looking at. But we had Nam Hung, which is a forest mushroom. So it's a Vietnamese shiitake mushroom, and that adds a richness to it, a umami flavor to it. But it's complementary to the background beer of that. I make a very good Weizen beer, but it's probably more of a Belgium style, where it's a wheat beer, but it's had the citrus that you would normally find in a Belgian wheat beer is from mak mak, which is a leaf that you'd see in Vietnam being wrapped around pork as they barbecue pork. So we're using a mak mak leaf to give it this sort of citrus note in a wheat beer. So these are the kind of things you can do and experiment with and come up with some very interesting and different flavors.
Be it that you are handcrafting these beers, and I guess quantity-wise, does that make a batch of beer, even though you're using the same ingredients, does that make one batch of beer slightly different from another? Or are they kind of traditionally exactly all the same? So on any given day, you can't really tell the difference, even though it's a different batch or a new batch?
Yeah, we produce in relatively small batches, certainly comparing with the big breweries. But it gives you an ability to experiment. So we have maybe a 500 litre batch or a 1,000 litre batch, but then that gets consumed very quickly, and therefore you can change the next a bit more of this, bit less of that, which you can do. We have our own tap rooms, as all the craft brewers here in Vietnam tend to have. They have their own tap rooms, so we can have regular customers come in, and you can say, the latest batch of this particular beer is, you should give this one a try. So again, it's a variety within your own range. All brewers aim for consistency. Once you've gone to a good recipe, you want to keep that recipe consistent. And so we've hit the mark with quite a few of our beers now. With some of the beers, we're still experimenting, which is part of the fun, both for the brewer and for the drinker, in terms of what's the latest batch can come up. Yeah.
And just to make sure that I'm understanding this, so these beers that you are made obviously have got a lifespan. So talk to me about, preservatives and alcohol content and things like that. What is the life of a brewed batch of beer?
Beer should be consumed as quickly as close as it can be to when it was produced. We're all natural. We don't use preservatives. We don't pasteurize. In fact, we don't filter at the moment. So it's a completely natural product. We would like to see the beer consumed probably between, in the 1 or 2 months after we've kegged it. But usually it's consumed quite a lot faster than that, certainly within a month. But again, it comes back to this having small batches. It gives you the opportunity to do that. Small batches. If you have got small batches in your own outlets that you can sell the product through and make sure it's moving, that just becomes less of an issue.
Okay, talk about the alcohol content.
The alcohol content. We have a range of, our beers have a range. We have Kim, which is down at 4.6% alcohol, so it's a very easy to drink. End of the day, either you've been to the beach or you've been working or had to work in Vietnam. But if you've been to the beach, it's a great end of the day kind of drink. And then we have a range of different alcohols and different products, right up to Twee, which is a Belgium strong dark ale, which is 7.5% alcohol. That's what we brew. Now, some of the other brewers, I think they could brew a lot, some stronger alcohols, and that maybe up to 10%. But I don't think those are particularly session beers. Maybe you have one. So our strongest at the moment is a 7.5% alcohol, and then we have an ingredient called tao gua in that one, which is like black cardamom. It's a black cardamom in that, which gives it that kind of spicy, almost a Christmas cake kind of addition, really.
So for my listeners who are coming to Vietnam, there's only one way they're going to try these beers because they only exist in your brewery, kind of, in Vietnam. They can't buy them off the shelf anywhere else,
sure,
can they?
Sure. No, they can't at the moment anyway. Maybe in time we'll package and we'll export, but at the moment we're selling only in our own outlets and some key accounts. We've got some friendly accounts that we supply to. So at the moment we have three outlets. We have one in Nha Trang, we have one in Quang Ngai, and we have one here in Da Nang. And they've been open a year now. Actually, the biggest one's been open a year now. Pretty centrally located and easy to find in Nha Trang, Da Nang, and Quang Ngai. And then we supply to some outlets down in Phu Quoc, which is a pretty famous tourist destination. And we'll slowly introduce it into other markets either as we open more outlets or we supply to more key accounts. But if somebody's visiting Vietnam and they want to try craft beer, there's a number of craft brewers down in Saigon. There's a number of them in Hanoi. There's not as many as in central Vietnam. So in Saigon, you've got Pasteur Street, you've got Heart of Darkness, you've got Tay Tay. There's been an explosion, or there was an explosion of craft brewers in Vietnam. And similarly in Hanoi, there's a couple of more than a couple. There's a few craft brewers up in Hanoi. It's an interesting place for tasting beer. It's probably not expected in a way. I think there's one thing about Vietnam which I don't think everybody appreciates, is that the Vietnamese are absolutely beer-centric. It's part of their culture. It's part of their social life. I often use the statistic of alcohol consumed. 95% of alcohol consumed in Vietnam by Vietnamese is beer. Now that might seem to be
staggering.
Well, it's an outlier. It's out there on its own. Everywhere else, every other country would have, a pretty mix of different alcohols. In Thailand it would be whiskey. In Japan it would be sake, and it might be rice wine in China. It could be soju in Korea. There's always an alternative, or wine in some markets. There's always an alternative alcohol, a socialization kind of alcohol consumed. But in Vietnam, and it has been for as long as I've known Vietnam, it's beer, and that's it's not just guys. It's wives and families, and beer is a central part of socializing.
How did the Vietnamese market take to craft beer?
I think very well. I mean, as you say, they're just general love and openness to the product, which helps. And Vietnamese are very curious, so they're naturally curious about new things, and international trends are very conscious of that. There's a lot of Vietnamese that go for education overseas, so they go to the US and they go to Australia or the UK. So they come back and they know what the latest has been happening. And then the Vietnamese see what the tourists are looking for, and the international business travelers are looking for, and they're obviously very open to craft beer. And so I think that is generally pretty acceptance. It's not really the barrier that you would normally see for new products or new initiatives. It wasn't something that had to be overly sold. Yeah.
Why am I laughing at that? No, it wouldn't be hard to sell. And just to clarify for me as well, I know you have it on tap, but you obviously have it in bottles as well, or how do you distribute it to other places like Phuoc or?
At the moment, I'm just kegging the new beers. I have bottled and canned beers in Vietnam before. There's a very, very good, efficient beer recycling system, bottle recycling system in Vietnam, which is obviously environmentally friendly, and it's part of the way the beer industry in Vietnam works. And then for the modern off-trade, I'm talking about convenience stores and supermarkets. They're pretty open to having cans on the shelf. So there's some canning. So actually, I'm looking at buying a can line maybe early next year. There's a can plant only half a kilometre away from my brewery, so it makes sense for me to start thinking about doing cans. Yeah.
I wanted to just delve a little bit more into the natural ingredients that you started talking about, and maybe could you speak to us just a little bit about how and where you get some of those natural ingredients from, and is this becoming an industry that a lot of Vietnamese are wanting to work in, and you pass on your skills to become a brewer and things like that? Like, is the industry kind of heading that way? And yeah, I'd just like to know more about not so much the mushrooms, but the mushrooms and the cardamom and things like that. Because what I think is unique to Vietnam is the flavours. And the flavours in Vietnam are, for some people, quite intense. And,
right.
Sometimes they can get upset tummies and things like that. But I feel it's like rich in flavour. So for me, it suits me. But I think the way vegetables and that are grown, the soil and all that kind of stuff plays a role. So maybe speak to us a little bit about that, and why did you choose mushrooms over something else, or why did you go, what steered you in which direction?
Okay. Okay, can I start first with what the basic raw materials for beer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. That was a big question. I just
Okay.
realised
So,
that. Yeah.
so the basic raw materials for beer are barley or malted barley, generally, and hops, and yeast. So actually, Vietnam doesn't have any barley growing regions or hop growing regions in Vietnam, but it is sort of in the middle of or between the big areas that do have that. So we can choose to get our barley from Europe, or we can choose to get our barley from Canada, or we can choose to get our barley from Australia. Actually, in Vietnam, most of the barley actually comes from Australia, I think. And there is a malting plant where the barley is malted here in Vietnam, run by Intermalt, which is associated with West Australia barley industry. So that's imported, and then the hops again can come from Australia, or can come from the US, or can come from Europe, Germany or France or wherever. So we have a selection of all sorts of different varieties of hops from around the world, which gives the craft brewers the flexibility to choose where they get their hops from. Now, in terms of that's kind of the international component of the beer, which is pretty standard. And as far as the local component, I'm quite lucky in that my wife's Vietnamese, and her relatives have land up in the Central Highlands and Northern Highlands, and so we can draw directly from their farm. So something like Mac Mat, we can get on the phone and have it delivered in a day or two when we run short. The forest, the shiitake, the Nam Hung, which is the shiitake mushrooms, that comes from the Northern Highlands. I think it's the Northern Highlands, and that comes from the forest. So basically, people go out into the forest and harvest these mushrooms, and then they put them on dry them and put them on bamboo sticks, and that's how we receive them. So they're very, very natural. And then likewise with the tau gua, the black cardamom, that again is a spice that comes from the Highlands. And then we have soy spice, which is a spice, a true spice, is a hot spice, and that we use in the hua, which is the beer hua, which is hua is fire. So we use it in basically a spicy red ale, and we add the soy spice to that. But all the local ingredients I add, they are complementary to the beer, and they're not going to bite your head off. They are subtle. They're subtle flavors that are complementary to the beer. So you might not like them. Sometimes, we have customers that don't like a particular flavor, but that's the whole thing about having choice. You won't particularly like that one, but you love that one. And we find that a lot. Some people might like it, some people might not. So, but that's great. I think that's a good part about it. We see flavors, and what I'm trying to do as well with the flavors are they should be recognizable to Vietnamese. So they, you see them, they're tasting it, and they recognize, they're not sure where's that flavor coming from. And then when you say what it is, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, okay. So if you like, my target consumer are local consumers. And so it gives them not only is the Five Elements a talking point, the New Hang sort of story, the narrative about Five Elements is a talking point, but also the flavors they recognize they recognize not straight away, but they suddenly realize where that flavor is coming from. So that's what I do. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's kind of a nice story to tell about it. That that you are targeting locals and Vietnamese, and obviously they're resonating with those flavors, and they're trying to pick it. And I think, as you say, when you are trying these beers, that's kind of part of the adventure, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
I don't really want to do copycat craft beers. So I don't want to do a New England IPA. I mean, why would I want to do a New England IPA in Vietnam? That kind of just copying a style and leaving as it is. I don't see much point in that. So I just want to try and create something, as you say, that's appealing to the locals, that is recognizable, has a good story behind it, and I like as well, which is good too. You make beers you enjoy.
Thanks very much for being on the show. I just want to finish up with what I'm going to include in the show for everyone listening. So we'll include, obviously, the addresses of where your
Sure.
breweries are, or where people can go to try it.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely put those in the show. I want to put a little bit more around the 5 styles, so I might get you to give us a little bit more information there, so everyone listening can understand that. Is there anything you want to finish off with?
I think it's always a bit difficult talking about beer without a beer in front of you. So I'd really like. So if anybody's coming to Vietnam and they want to, by all means come to our brouhaha in Da Nang, and if I'm here, always ask for me. I'm more than happy to sit down and talk about the beers and beer glass in front of everybody. I think it's a lot easier and a bit more fun.
A bit more fun. Brilliant.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks for being on the show, Gary.
Okay.
All the best.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Check out the episode notes for more information.
What about Vietnam?
Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review, and stay tuned for more fun adventures in Vietnam.
What about Vietnam?